Gaming Manual.
Welcome back to the Gaming Manual. I'm Josh, and today we are discussing Electronic Gaming Monthly, issue 122. I remember this ad. It was about being able to make your own fighter in a fighting game, and I thought, I bet I could make the best, most powerful fighter ever. But I never actually played the game. The idea of making your own video game, or being given enough tools to customize it in such a way that it felt like you were making something new, always fascinated me. Now, if I ever came across this game, I would still want to try it out. Not because I would want to try to make a fighter, but just to get a feel of how the game actually was supposed to play out. Crash Team Racing, or later, and better known as CTR, was one of the first race kart games that I remember for the PlayStation. While at first you might think it's just a Mario Kart clone, it is a completely different game that stands on its own. But two of the main features that changed how the game felt were the drifting and the items. The items had a standard version and an upgraded version, but you could only use the upgraded version if you collected 10 fruit. You would also have to keep collecting this fruit because anytime you take damage, either from another player going off course, you would lose fruit and it would result in downgrading your items. As for the slide-in, the drift boost was triggered manually. You could do it up to 3 times and it had a bit of a timing window to it, but once you learned how to do it, it was an amazing feeling. Now Spyro was like the PlayStation version of Mario 64 for me. I know that Crash Bandicoot came out before Spyro, but Crash was not as free-roaming as Spyro was. You were stuck more on the track going forward and backward. You really could go anywhere, or at least they made it feel like you could. There were invisible walls, but the game encouraged exploration, and I know a few times I thought I had broken the game or got somewhere that I shouldn't have, only to later find out that they were gems and extra lives over there. You were also rescuing dragons that were turned into crystal statues, and for me it seemed very similar to how stars were found in Mario 64. I remember the Tony Hawk games, and let's be honest, the single-player mode was okay, but the real reason you would play this game was for the multiplayer mode with friends. For me and my friends, it was a blast trying to see who could get higher scores or seeing if you could play off the biggest trick and actually land it. Here's an eye grabber, an ad for EB Games with PlayStation, Nintendo 64, Game Boy, and of course Dreamcast. All sorts of games are shown, and it's not just on one page either. It's over a couple of pages. I know it looked silly, but it worked. Showing off all popular games or big hits was a good way to get someone's attention who was just flipping through. Haven't played Lunar. The sequel, Lunar 2, was one that I was looking forward to, and to this day, is probably one of my top 3 role-playing games. Though the graphics were comparable to Super Nintendo, but it made up for it with its gameplay, having beautiful animated cutscenes, great controls, and an amazing story that was really compelling. If you haven't played this game yourself and you're a fan of JRPGs, I would highly recommend you try this game yourself. Silhouette Mirage is one of those games that I never really heard anyone talk about. It is mostly unknown when I bring it up in a conversation. The only reason I know of it is because I remember I went to go rent a game, and the one I wanted was unavailable, so I rented this one instead because it looked interesting. I'm glad I did, because this game was incredibly fun and addictive. The screenshots here really don't do the game justice. It takes a bit to get used to, but once you understand it, it's a fantastic game that's hard to put down. And it's from the same people who made Gunstar Heroes. Okay, this guy is way too energetic just because he's using a different controller. Also, I don't know why, the way his body is positioned just makes him look odd. All jokes aside, this was a better controller than the actual 64 controller, but they didn't have that weird middle part handle sticking out. Just looking at it, it looks like a lot more comfortable controller too. You don't have to hold your hands so close together or figure out where to position them. Sega spent a massive amount of money to promote the Dreamcast, and this here was part of it. But there was a lot of information about Dreamcast in this review. For its time, Dreamcast really was ahead of other consoles, including what the add-ons were made for. I remember reading this section and getting really excited about how advanced the Dreamcast felt, and then seeing some of these games, I really couldn't wait to play some of these for myself. There were lots of different controllers that were created for the Dreamcast, and while only a few games could use these controllers, I recall using a couple of them, and they felt great to use. There was also the Virtual Memory Unit, the VMU, that almost every game made use of in some way. Yeah, you could play the game without it, but it did add a lot more to the game. Often, there were also some kind of mini-games that you could play on the VMU if you had a save file on it. Turn it into a small portable game, kind of like the Game & Watch handheld. This is where I learned about the Neo Geo Pocket Color, and a couple years later, I got one as a gift from my mother. It even came with 10 games, with one of them being a Sonic game. I still have my Neo Geo, even now, and I still play it from time to time. I would love to see some of these games remastered or re-released. As with every gaming magazine, here is the section for hints, tricks, cheat codes to help you overcome difficult, challenging parts of a new game. It did feel like every gaming magazine had to do this if they wanted to at least get their magazine to sell well, as this was a huge part of why people were buying it in the first place. The big difference was how the information was laid out and how easy it was to find what you were looking for. Thanks for watching, and if you liked what you saw, give us a like and consider subscribing if you haven't already. As always, we appreciate your time, and we'll see you in the next video.